On today's Daily Detroit, we talk about a shipwreck. It is Thursday, March 17th, 2022. I'm J.R. Stays, coming to you from a 70-degree North End studio. It is good to be with you on this St. Patrick's Day. The shipwreck of the Atlanta was recently found amazingly preserved in Lake Superior. Based in Port Huron, the schooner often passed by a city of Detroit from the 1890s. Then, the tallest building it would have seen on our skyline is one you can still see today, the Fort Street Presbyterian Church downtown, with a towering 265-foot steeple built in 1877. Corey Adkins from the Great Lakes Shipwreck Historical Society joins me to share some Michigan Maritime history, so let's just jump into it. How did you come across this?
Well, first, thanks for having me on, Jared. This is great. We have a research vessel that we use every summer to go out and look for shipwrecks. And last year, we found quite a few. It was kind of a very odd year for finding shipwrecks because there's years where you don't find any. Last year, we're above 6 right now. So how we do that is in our research vessel, our Marine Operations Director, Daryl Ortel, he gets in our boat and just does what we call mowing the lawn. So that means going back and forth along these grids to find out where shipwrecks are not, because there's quite a few of them along the Shipwreck Coast between Whitefish Point and Grand Marais. So that's what he does. We got a team goes out there and finds them where they're not. Last year, he saw this blip on the radar, or on the sonar, and identified a shipwreck. And then from there, what we do is we take our ROV, put it underneath the surface of the water, and this is 650 feet down, and we discovered it was, in fact, the Atlanta. And we also discovered that it's a beautifully preserved shipwreck on the bottom of Lake Superior.
Why is there the possibility of it being so beautifully preserved?
It's so cold down there. Imagine it's just above freezing at the bottom there. It's, in the mid 30s, and there's no salt. It's clean, fresh, very, very cold water. And that's what preserves the shipwrecks up on Lake Superior. And we don't have zebra or quagga mussels up in Lake Superior as well. It's like you saw it 130 years ago, and that's when the Atlanta went down.
So why do they call it the Shipwreck Coast? I mean, imagine, because there's a lot of shipwrecks, but what about it made it that way?
So when you turn the corner at Whitefish Point, you're basically on your own. There's nowhere to go until you would get to a place like Grand Marais or Munising. So when storms would pop up back then, we didn't have radar and we didn't have all the weather technology to warn sailors. They would go around Whitefish Point, and if a storm blew up, there's nothing anybody could do. And so that's where a lot of ships went down. It's because of how rough that is, and especially if you get a northwest wind or even a north wind, and it just beats up on those ships. It got to be so bad, the government back then made a string of life-saving stations from Whitefish Point to Grand Marais. There was 5 of them: Whitefish Point, Vermilion, Chris Point, Deer Park, and Grand Marais. The U.S. Life Saving Service created these, so when ships would go down, they could actually go out and help them.
So I understand this is about 35 miles away from Deer Park. What happened? Like, what is this story? Like, what was the Atlanta? What did it do in its life? And I mean, we're talking about the 1890s now.
The schooner Atlanta was an old schooner barge. Actually, it was a relatively new ship, but it was turned into a schooner barge, and it was being towed by a steamship called the Wilhelm. And that was common back in the day for a steamship to tow vessels that had sails. So it was coming from Buffalo, New York, went right past Detroit on its last trip, went right up the Detroit River, past Port Huron, and as we got into Lake Superior, a spring storm popped up on May 4th, 1891, and they found themselves in grave trouble. And as the Wilhelm was trying to tow the Atlanta, the tow line snapped.
Mm.
Now, during all this, the Atlanta's 3 masts sheared off, so it had no sails. The Atlanta did not have any engines or anything like that, so it was at the mercy of Lake Superior. The Wilhelm couldn't help it. It had no way to help the people on board, so the Wilhelm steamed to safety, and the Atlanta was just stuck out in Lake Superior, just getting beaten up. The pumps couldn't keep the water out, so it got to be the point where the crew, there were 7 crew members, there was 6 men and 1 woman on board. They got into the lifeboats, and because they could kind of see the Crisp Point life-saving station, so they got into the lifeboats and they started to row toward shore, just getting pounded by the waves. And at one point, the lifeboat capsized. Ooh. From there, 3 men got thrown off, and they all drowned right there. And the others managed to get back into the lifeboat, but then it capsized again, and then 2 other people died there. While this was all happening, the watchman at the Crisp Point life-saving station did peer out and did see something, and it was them, but he thought it was a floating log. So he didn't alert the crew that probably, maybe, could have saved more people. We don't know, but there was a person walking the beach that saw what was going on, ran to the Crisp Point life-saving station, alerted the crew members. They got out there and did manage to save 2 of the 7. So 5 people did die while they were trying to get to shore.
So that whole method of shipping, it was far more dangerous back in the day, huh?
Yeah, because, you've probably stood and seen a storm blow in, and how the waves and the wind, it's an inland sea. They call Lake Superior an inland sea. And Great Lakes waves from what I hear from sailors, Great Lakes waves are much more dangerous than ocean waves, because ocean waves are really far apart, and they're more like a roller coaster, where Great Lakes waves are kind of like a washing machine agitator, where they come at you at all different ways, and they're a lot harder to deal with than an ocean wave would be. So that's one of the reasons why when people would get caught out there, it was so dangerous, and that's why there's so many shipwrecks down there, and there's still a lot left to be uncovered. But the story of the Atlanta, I just like when you think about what those guys were going through out there, how scared they must have been, how terrified, and then as you're trying to row to shore, your shipmates are dying, they're drowning right in front of you, and it's just something to think about.
So now that you found it, what's the plan?
Are going to go back and put the ROV back down on it. You're not allowed to take any artifacts off any of the bottomlands in the Great Lakes, so we are just going to study it and continue to try to tell the story. It's the take only pictures, leave only footprints type rule. One of the things we would love to hear, if anybody's out there who might be a descendant of the Atlanta, we'd love for you to contact us, and we'd love to talk to you to see if you were one of these people were your relatives.
So now on my to-do list for the summer is to go to the Great Lakes Shipwreck Museum. So what am I going to find? Because I'm really excited about this. For listeners, I mentioned to you this off air that I was somebody who, as a kid, my grandmother would pull the freighter tables from the newspaper, and she had a place near the Detroit River, and sit on the shore and watch the boats go by. And so for me, this kind of stuff is fascinating. So what would I find when I get to the museum?
Well, one of the things that you would find is something that both Belle Isle and Detroit and we have in common. We have something from the Edmund Fitzgerald up there.
Oh.
The anchor sits there at the museum on Belle Isle, the Dawson Museum, I believe it's called.
Mm-hmm. Yep, I go to the Dawson pretty often. Yep, the Dawson. Yep.
And we have the bell of the Edmund Fitzgerald in our museum. In 1995, in a partnership with the Canadian ministry, because the Fitzgerald is in Canadian water, we were able to raise the bell of the Fitzgerald, and that's sitting in our museum. And many people come up just to see that. But then when they do come, they find our museum is just full of other stories of shipwreck and survival and man versus nature. It's a very somber museum to go through. You'll learn a lot, but at the same time, we have other buildings you can go through. A restored lightkeepers' quarters. We have an exhibit on the U.S. Life Saving Service, and we've had our theater shut down for a few years because of the wonderful COVID. But we're going to reopen that this year, I believe, so people can see. We have a 15-minute documentary of how we rose the bell of the Fitzgerald.
Oh, cool.
And also, beyond that, we have one of the most beautiful beaches on the planet, in my opinion. So you can walk out on the deck. You can see, if you're lucky, you'll be there on a day where the freighters are coming by. They're just right off the point. You can go rock hunt. You can walk the beach and just look out onto Lake Superior and just think about all the stories that have happened out there some of them still lie underneath the water.
Michigan beaches are absolutely beautiful.
Yeah, it's just a great place to walk and think and reminisce and do anything you want. Then we have a gift shop up there that has t-shirts and stuff, and it's just a great place to go. I mean, the first time I went up there, I fell in love with it, and then I became a board member for a long time, and now I'm one of the spokesmen. I'm creating documentaries and stuff. So
that's awesome.
It's been great.
That is awesome. And, going to I went to shipwreckmuseum.com and looking at all the pictures. I mean, this is going to be a fun trip, and I encourage people to go check it out. And not just me saying it as a boat nerd. This isn't any kind of sponsored thing. Like, I'm just a boat nerd. Corey Adkins, I really appreciate you and your time today on Daily Detroit and sharing the story of this schooner that, it went past Detroit. I believe it was based in Port Huron, right? Atlanta.
That was its home port.
Yeah. And a little bit of Michigan history and sharing it with us. I appreciate you.
No problem. I appreciate your time. It's been a fun conversation.
Well, friends, if you haven't already and you love the show, consider leaving a 5-star review on Apple Podcasts, Spotify, whatever you use. The more people that know about the show, the better. But remember, thank you so much for you and your time listening. Tomorrow, Devin O'Reilly joins me. There are a ton of stories to talk about around town, and we will get to them with a very busy day. I'm Jer Stays. Remember, you are somebody, and I'll see you around Detroit.